Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the football experience. Another slightly longer hiatus than what we're used to, but it might actually become a regular thing because real life takes over. The hobbies have to take a back seat, unfortunately. So, yeah, we'll see how things run, and you'll see how often you get to see our faces. Hopefully, once a week at a minimum. Hopefully.
We'll be here when we're here, all right?
Yeah. Well, so yeah, the format of the show might be sort of, I don't know, more bigger picture rather than in detail analysis. Unless it's a really big game that's like, like an awesome, 4-5 scoreline or something like that. Then yeah, we'll see how things run. But yeah, Caleb, how you been during our mini hiatus?
Sick. So
Sick.
yeah, that's not been great. Got the dreaded Rona, so I'm recovering from it.
Did you ever have
But
it
yeah,
or?
watch. It's first time,
Okay.
and yeah, it kind of sucks.
It's
I don't advise. If you're ever thinking of having the Rona for the first time, don't have the Rona.
don't have
It's
at
not
all.
that fun.
Did you lose your smell or taste buds?
Uh, Both to a degree, definitely taste. So
I
I'd say I'm operating at like 40% of taste, maybe more now, but initially,
see.
it's nasty.
Mine was really weird. Like I lost. Alright, so I had it, and then I obviously felt sick. I think one day, you know how you have like that whole body sort of fever, and like you feel like
Yeah,
you couldn't even like I couldn't even like open like the door handle. Like that's how like weak I was like in my muscles, and like that was one day, and then the rest of it was just like sort of sniffles, cough. But then as I was getting better, like you know how you can sort of judge it. Like the first 3 days is like it's generally like
rough.
no for me, from what I've noticed when I get sick, the first 3 days are like, okay, I can feel the first 2 or 3 days I can feel like that like scratch in my throat. I can feel like my nose start to like get a little bit runny and a little bit clogged, and then like the next 3 days is like that's the top of the line, that's the peak. And then the last 3 or 4 days, it's like it's starting to calm down. In those last 3 or 4 days, that's when I actually lost my sense of smell. So like it was at the very end that I lost my sense of
Yeah,
smell, and then it took me a while. It took me like a couple of weeks to get it back, and then when I did get it back, it was sort of like all like fucked up. Like things smelt the way that they shouldn't smell. Like for instance, cigarette smoke smelt exactly like ham for me, and then like
ham.
yeah, and
Wow.
Coca Cola is still sort of a little bit shit, like the taste of it. But Coca Cola is not really healthy anyway, so whatever. That I don't really care about. And I don't drink that much anyway. But on the occasion that I do go out and want to have a like drink it with like a meal or something, like, I don't order it because it tastes like crap. But yeah, like that's my little story.
Yeah, I'm with you with the sensations, the smell and the taste being definitely dulled. I'm a bit blocked up at the moment. I don't know if you can hear, but yeah, the taste ones, the smell I can kind of live without, but the taste,
Nah,
I need
yeah.
to my full taste buds back. I enjoy food too much. Come on, what is this? So hopefully that clears up soon. But yeah, not the most fun time, but it's all right. I'm still a bit like lethargic, but we're getting there. We're getting there.
Yeah.
The show must go on, as they say.
Well, hopefully a couple more days and you'll be recovered. But yeah, with the taste and smell thing, if you do like lose it or whatever, it can take like up to a year for it to like properly come back. Like from
The
what I've read.
long COVID, no,
Yeah.
I don't want that. Long COVID, please.
Yeah. Well, that's that's what you get. But like it's weird though, like because I. Obviously it's like mutated and stuff like that, and there's like different variants. Like you obviously got like I don't know, like the fifth or sixth one probably. I think I got the first one or maybe the second one because
Oh,
I
COVID
got it.
19. We must be up to 25 by now. That's me. Up to
I
COVID 25.
No, I think it's still 19, but then you have like all those like alpha, beta, omicron, all that crap. I think I got the one just before omicron, which is like the third one because I think omicron. I think I got sick in like October, and then like omicron came out in like December. So like,
came out, they dropped the new Rona.
the trilogy. But yeah, all right. Enough about our little Rona stories.
Is it 2023 or is it 2020 right now? What are we talking about? How retro of this?
We've gone back in time, sharing, reminiscing on the Rona. But I think there's some football to talk about. Like I can't remember I think the last thing we talked about was when United lost to Arsenal, and then we had the international break. And we've had one weekend. The weekend of football came back, so I guess we didn't really miss out on too much. We didn't preview anything, which is fine. I guess we can talk about the weekend in general. I told for our listeners, Caleb already knows this. On Saturday, I had a stressful day with not the actual TV service provider, but the third-party provider that provides that my TV service provider buys the rights from. So the third-party provider was having technical difficulties, so I couldn't actually watch the games properly. Like it would run for 5 minutes and then it would stop running, run for 5 minutes, stop running, and then. Yeah, so it was a shitty day for football for me. I didn't really get to watch any of it properly. But we can go into like I guess the bigger picture of it. Man City keeps on winning. Liverpool keep on winning. Tottenham win. I think they set a record now for the latest win. In terms of minutes, because it was like the 114th minute that they ended up winning in.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that happened this season. Obviously,
yeah,
with the directives for added time.
Chelsea keep on struggling. Arsenal finally. I think the stat was that in 10 visits to Merseyside, this is the first time in like 10 visits that they actually won. So in 5 years...
What was it the last time they won under Wenger? It's like 17, 18 or something. I think I saw the lineups.
No, I think in Merseyside, because I think Arteta has won at Everton, but like maybe like in his first season, but like apparently in 10 visits, that's 5 seasons. Actually, that would be Wenger, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think 17, 18 was what I saw.
Yeah, so maybe it was Wenger. Yeah. So, but yeah, like apparently this is the first time that they actually won it in Merseyside, in five seasons.
When you think how bad Everton have been in all those years.
Yeah, I was coming into the game and I was thinking, okay, they're a bit of that hoodoo side, sort of like what Crystal Palace has been for Man City the last couple of seasons, because I think like we talked about it not last season, but the season before that like Man City just can't seem to win at Crystal Palace, or they always have a hard time, and Crystal Palace always seem to get a win against them. But yeah, like Everton became that for Arteta, or Merseyside in general has become that for Arteta.
Goodison, and well, I guess the other place is Anfield, so it's always pretty tough place to go.
Where do you want to start in terms of the Premier League at least, and then obviously we'll move around the leagues, and then we'll finish off with some Champions League review and preview. We'll try and make this a quick podcast. We won't go into too much detail.
I think it'll be quicker because for once I don't feel like I have that much to say. So I'll kind of throw it back to you and ask, if we're doing bigger picture stuff, who is the team, apart from Arsenal obviously, who is the team that you're most excited to watch games of so far this season? No matter like who they're playing against, it's like I kind of want to tune in to this team, or I want to see what this team's up to so far after, I guess, 5 games so far.
Well, I have watched a little bit of Tottenham. I do like the way they play, but I think in terms of like the overall team, I still think that they need signings, and like I guess if you're comparing it with last season, it's night and day the way that they're playing. Brighton are continuing on with their run. So they've been a pretty interesting team to watch.
Well, think about who they played on the weekend.
Yeah,
Man United. Man United is a team that I always want to see what's going on with them because I think they're just in a moment where they could lose to anyone. And to be fair, I think you'd have to start on the Brighton side. I think this is the place to start. It's United again. Surprise, surprise. We'll talk about maybe some other stuff and why we're maybe not talking about other stuff. But with United, it's the biggest. They have the most storylines around them, really, don't they? They have this comedic air about them once again, and I don't think it'll be too long before we hear exasperated Roy Keane and animated Gary Neville come back in the Super Sunday lineup on Sky Sports afterwards, and I don't know. We might already be there after the weekend. But to be fair, you got to start on Brighton because I think Brighton they're a team who, yeah, you quite rightly mentioned in that short list of teams that you want to watch this season. They're a team who I don't know where to put the ceiling on them. I think the ceiling at the moment could go as high as just below a title challenge, maybe like a
top
third
four
or
challenge.
fourth place finish. Well, yeah, definitely. Like I would put them as it stands. They're definitely in a top five. I guess we need to say now top five challenge.
The only thing with Brighton though is that I think they've done it for the past I think the season after they came into the Premier League, I think they've been in 4 seasons now. Is that right?
Oh, you're racking my brain now.
Well,
It was the 18-19 season. No, 19-20. 18. I don't know.
Regardless, I think that pretty much every season they've always had this sort of run where they won the first 5 or 6 or 7 games, and they were always in amongst that top 4, top 5, top 6, and then they dropped off in the middle of the season.
Yeah, but what's the difference?
Well, they're just sort of having that exact same run. I guess the only difference is that like they still play good football then, but it seems like maybe they've reinforced the team now.
But what's the difference? Who's on the sidelines? They didn't have De Zerbi at the start of last season. Graham Potter was a good manager.
Yeah.
But they didn't have De Zerbi, and I think De Zerbi is... I've been a bit resistant to it because it feels like the indie sort of thing. Brighton in general feel like the hipster's choice, or they have for a while. I think they're now a bit mainstream. But I don't know how much longer I can resist it for because I thought... Look, I rated him highly enough to have thought that Napoli should have gone for him in the summer. I now rate him highly enough to say that Napoli should have moved heaven and earth to get him in the summer. I think they really should have gone for him to sort of consolidate on what they did last season. And his tactically as a manager, he is right up there with the best at the moment. I want to see it for a prolonged period, but it is somewhat prolonged now because obviously Man United come with a different game plan in the match, and they go with the narrow diamond. And honestly, all the criticism that maybe Ten Hag is getting from some quarters, I think is a little unfair. I guess we'll touch on that when we touch on United. But in terms of when you look at on the contrast, and I feel like we did this last season when Brighton went to United, if we remember, they won that game at Old Trafford was that the opening game? Might have been the opening game of the season.
Game.
Yeah, and we did the contrast. I remember even back then doing the contrast, not between managers so much as, although it was fair to do a contrast between managers because Potter's stock was so high and Ten Hag was coming a bit unknown. But I did the contrast between the centre-backs, between Harry Maguire and Lewis Dunk, and we saw in the international break that a lot of people are now calling that if you want that sort of a centre-back in that style, in the Harry Maguire style, well, you've got a better alternate in Lewis Dunk in the way he plays, because at the moment, he is better Harry Maguire. I know Maguire doesn't play in this match, but at the moment, that's the contrast, and that's what's happened in the international scene, and we see in the management scene, the Brighton, you've got to say right now, and even for what we saw last season, De Zerbi is, for me, objectively a better manager than Ten Hag at the moment. And I know Ten Hag, well, I know the circumstances are different, but sorry. the way De Zerbi just outthought him so pretty easily in terms of what Ten Hag threw differently at the game, and Brighton just figured it out. That's why I think I'm paraphrasing a bit, but De Zerbi said we're not a big club yet, but we're like a good team. We're a team with good players, and he said pretty much words to the effect of it's not surprising that we beat Manchester United at Old Trafford, and it's not. And Brighton are that quality of side. I know United have a lot to do with why they get beaten at home at the moment, but Brighton are a team who can beat you any which way you ask for it. Tactically, they've got one of the best managers in the world. Their players look exceptional. Pascal Gross got a call up for Germany at the age of 30 odd in the international break. So their players just have the mindset to keep improving. Danny Welbeck opens the scoring. Doesn't matter that Evan Ferguson's injured. Karen Matoma's still at the club. I don't know how, because I think a big club should have snapped him up, but he's such a good piece. And the players that they just keep selling players for these extraordinary prices, but just bring in players who do exactly the same good job and are pretty much just as good. It's just, I don't know. They are really smart, but the way they're playing, they do. Well, I might go against De Zerbi a little bit. They are a good team. The way they can beat you in any way that you ask, technically, in a press, they're good enough to hold their own defensively. Maybe that's their only weak spot, but it's so hard to get the ball off them in the first place. I mean, what are you meant to do? So, look, maybe European football this season catches up with them. Maybe, I don't know. At the moment, though, why are we putting a ceiling on Brighton? Because the football they play is some of the best in the league, if not some of the best in Europe. And yeah, I'm not. The only thing I'll rule them out of is a genuine title challenge for how good the teams, especially one team in particular, is in that title race. The team you have to beat. But in terms of anything else, they can beat any other team in the Premier League. I think even over a 38 game season. It just depends on. Again, for me, it's the only question mark is that toll of European football when and if that takes.
That could be interesting because it's Europa League that they're in, right? Not Conference League.
I believe it was.
I think it did because they finished sixth, didn't they?
They were only one spot behind Liverpool, I think.
Yeah, so they got Europa League then. Regardless of whether it's I think Conference League you travel a little bit further. But regardless. That could be maybe the thing that sort of derails their season because
maybe the January transfer market as well. Maybe people coming from.
Did they really spend that 160, 170 million that they got for McAllister and Caicedo?
Exactly, they're probably still sitting on that. And honestly, the big clubs around, especially around Europe, aren't really throwing around that kind of money, so it would only be the Premier League, and who knows if Brighton are sitting third or fourth when January rolls around, why would those players want to move? So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Like that, I think by all accounts, they're a really well run club, and now and it's starting to show as well because they're starting to over the last couple of seasons. I think they've made like that steady climb on the ladder, like. I can't remember off the top of my head, but like for instance, going 10th to 9th to 8th to 6th, so they're slowly starting to build up.
The old Union Berlin corollary.
Yeah. But yeah, full credit to Brighton. That it's a shame that I couldn't watch that match because of the technical difficulties I was facing. I did see a clip of I don't know what goal it was, but like they basically had like 30 passes. Before
the Pascal Gross goal,
it's just like, and the whole time I'm just thinking like, oh man, United cannot get the ball off them. Like, there's no intensity for them to try and win the ball. Like they're happy to just sort of contain. Meanwhile, it just seems like Brighton are like just sort of slicing through them finally, like a surgeon, like cut by cut.
Yeah.
Until eventually they just finally like dig in and make that big incision with the goal.
Yeah. But they play amazing. They play really good football.
Yeah.
For the players that they they've got as well. It's quite incredible what they're doing at the moment. But I think you kind of gave us a segue to talk about the other half of this game, and I think we're obliged to go and kick United while they're down, being Liverpool and Arsenal persuasion. But I want to start by playing not devil's advocate, but I will give Ten Hag a little defense, although not that much defense, because while the situation around him could be seen as unsatisfactory, it could also, for a manager who likes to have control, like himself, I don't know if he can take all the blame, but he should take a lot of the blame because he's had his fingerprints on so much since they sort of deemed him to be the man to take them forward. I think, I heard it on, I can't remember which podcast, but I think he had big say in the transfers over the. It's not like United have a higher up sort of structure that goes above his head and sort of has the real input on the transfers in particular is what I'm thinking of here. So I have no doubt Onana was definitely his.
Oh yeah.
And I think we should talk about him.
Well, a couple of the transfers.
I think they were all his, basically.
Well, like Anthony was his, Martinez was his because they both came from Ajax. Onana is an ex-Ajax player as well. Like
Amrabat worked with at one of the clubs in Holland.
Yeah, one of the smaller clubs like Utrecht or something. One of those clubs, yeah. But like all of these signings have been his. So just before you go on your road or tangent or whatever, this whole talk about like the Glazers like being bad owners and stuff, like I can't necessarily understand that because I saw something where like since Ten Hag has come in, he's spent like 400 or 500 million on players, and they've all been his players as well. Like, so they've been signing
except
the
for
checks.
maybe the one who had the biggest impact last season, Casemiro. I don't know if he was his.
Yeah, he probably wasn't, but like all in all, like it looks like he's had pretty much total control over the transfers.
I don't
get that.
Go as far as give.
He's got an investment.
I don't want to. He's definitely got investment, but I don't want to go as far as saying the Glazers have been good owners.
I'm not saying that they've been good, but I'm saying that they've at least invested in the manager and given him the tools to succeed.
Yeah, but the big question mark with the Glazers is always how much of it is investment from their pocket or how much is it just recycling the club's money and then making sure that they never have to dig into their own pockets. And
do they need to dig into their own pockets? Considering United is, I think they generate as much or the same revenue as Real Madrid.
I know. But I know Old Trafford. Old Trafford doesn't look like the Bernabeu does now.
Yeah.
The training facilities I've heard have not impressed a lot of players. So that's what I'm trying not to get confused between them seemingly outlaying on players, which they no doubt have on salaries and on transfer fees, and being good owners and getting the infrastructure of the club right. Like, I don't want to get those two things confused. So I understand why United fans will be annoyed at the owners. But at the same time, they were there with Ferguson, and a good manager who Ferguson was, with the infrastructure that he had built for all those years, continued to win with the Glazers in charge. So yeah, I get both sides of the argument is what I'm trying to say on the Glazers. But on the thing that I know better and I understand better, I believe, in terms of the manager and the football, I didn't want to get it confused because I wanted to say most of these signings look like they've been Ten Hag signings. But to offer him a little defence in this game in particular, I probably thought going to a narrow diamond was one of the more logical moves before the game. Brighton definitely build up in that box. They definitely have two holding midfielders always playing inside the centre backs, so you want to stifle them in the middle. They always find ways to play through it anyway, so that's how good a side they are. And the big thing is how unbelievably. Is it Casemiro watching or is it last season's Fabinho that we're watching? Because it's yet again another Brazilian holding midfielder who hit 30 and just fell off a cliff, because if Casemiro doesn't rectify this soon, he is very, very much in that Fabinho territory of last season, and he is miles off it. He is so far off the pace this season. And for a player who was asked to do so much last season and did it, and that's why they finished where they finished, for me, in big part, it wasn't all him, but for him to be just not that guy again, and again, I'll quibble with recruitment of definitely Mason Mount, who is like no blame here to him, but he's obviously injured. But even if he's in the team, how much is he helping Casemiro? Not that much. So he gets McTominay in, and I know McTominay just does not perform well in a United shirt, but at least he's somewhat of a presence and he can run. And at the moment, Casemiro needs players around him, and so I think it was a logical move on the part of the tactical contrast to Brighton, and I think it was a logical move in terms of what his team's deficiencies are at the moment. The problem was they didn't have the next plan when Brighton figured it out within 5 minutes and said, well, let's just play with lots of width and make sure that they can't congest that middle of the pitch. And then United looked very one-dimensional. To be fair, I thought United started pretty well for the first maybe 15 or so minutes in the game, but once Welbeck somewhat scores against the run of play, it's all Brighton from there. So yeah, the lack of plan B, but if you want to quibble at Ten Hag, it's about what he hasn't built over the summer. It's just like, it's crazy to think that you had this team seemingly looking good, and then did your focus change away from what you did well last season? Because what I thought United did well, and their defensive record won't back it up to the extent that it should, but they defended well last season. If you took away those aberration games last season of the City 6 at the Etihad, the Liverpool 7 at Anfield, I think there was another kind of aberration in there at some point. But if you took away those real bad outlier games, their defensive record was close to, I think it might have been better than Arsenal, but it was close to the Cities.
I don't think it was better than Arsenal's, but it would have been close.
If you take those games away, if you take those. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. And so for the most part, they were solid. And I must say as well, Lissandro's not playing at the same level he was last season. And then you've obviously got, surprise, an injury to Varane. I mean, how much should we have expected that anyway? And honestly, goalkeeping-wise, do you think they've upgraded, Onana over De Gea?
Well, I saw a stat that apparently Onana's faced 10 shots or 12 shots, and he's copped, on target, and he's copped 7 goals.
Yeah. This is the problem with Onana. I thought Onana was hugely overrated in the run-in that he had for Inter last season. I'm not saying he's a bad goalkeeper. I'm saying he's a good goalkeeper. I'm saying he's in the Edison mold for me. He's not quite as good as Edison, but he's a goalkeeper who blinds managers because he can seemingly play out with his feet. And he's a bang average goalkeeper for me. I think his positioning's questionable. I think we saw in the Wolves game when he comes out for things, sometimes he can be a bit flappy. And he doesn't have the strongest hands when he gets to things either. I think he is a goalkeeper who can pull off good saves, but he's not foundationally a great goalkeeper and look, we can all have our quibbles with David De Gea, but goalkeeping wise, for me, he's a better goalkeeper than Onana. Now, I think they're about the same level for what Onana can give you with his feet, but I think prioritizing that shows you the whole mindset of Ten Hag over the summer, and why for me it was wrong, and he should have doubled down on let's be solid defensively again this season and keep building on that. But I don't know, wanted to come in, and people will criticize, he's trying to change things on the fly, he's trying to go against what he believes in. I just think that's what you kind of have to do. You couldn't have come in with these grand ideas with your head in the cloud. You need to be cemented in some sort of reality. And if you look at great teams, for me, great teams are always built on their defense. And for him to seemingly, I don't know what goes on behind the doors, but it seems to me, not quite abandon that, but he never reinforced the fact that that's what made United a good team last season. And you can't see it in their performances. And that's why they look shambolic defensively to start this season, and if they are shambolic defensively, they don't give themselves any chance in games. If they're good defensively, they always have a chance because last season in particular, Marcus Rashford went to the next level. I don't think he's gone off it that much this season. Some of his finishing is a little bit old, Marcus Rashford-y, but he's still a constant threat. And hopefully Højlund can have that impact for them as well. But they need to be solid defensively before any of that matters, because if it doesn't matter, they're already out of these games before they've started. And yeah, man, I don't know. United, easy to kick them at the moment, but they are the team that I am in the Premier League most interested to tune in and see what they're doing, because they're a soap opera at the moment.
Well, speaking of soap operas, did you see? Apparently, there was like a massive bust up between like 4 or 5 players in the dressing room afterwards.
Oof.
I think it was like.
Of course, we're going to hear about.
I think it was
that.
like Lindelof, McTominay, Bruno, and I think like 1 or 2 others as well. Like,
why am I not surprised that Bruno was involved?
well, he is the captain, and even if he wasn't the captain, he would still be involved. But
would you be? I would be so upset if if a player like Bruno was ever captain of Liverpool. I'd be so disappointed, man. I got to be honest. Like, attitude-wise, that guy should not be touching my armband for like a big team.
Well, I remember speaking to Tiff's brother. Like, he supports United, and this was before the season started, when it was still sort of up in the air of who would be the captain. And like, obviously the talk was Bruno, and he was saying like, yeah, Bruno, like, I don't mind it and whatever. I'm like, dude, I like, he's not captain material. Like, I would not have him captain. And then like I just sort of started thinking about the whole team and like, who could be captain? Like, with De Gea, I think already then leaving, or rumor mill was that he was leaving. I don't think I'd even put De Gea as captain, to be honest, because he it seemed like he lost the support, like this sort of like aura or this support of being the club's longest standing player. And the only logical sort of choice would have been Casemiro after the season that he had.
But after these 5 games, there's absolutely no one.
But maybe if he was given captaincy, maybe you would sort of see slightly different performances from him. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you'd see something different from him. But yeah, he would have been the logical choice. After that, like, maybe Varane, but Varane's always injured. And then after that, I don't know, maybe Rashford to like lead from the front, sort of like a Harry Kane for Tottenham. But like in that order, that would be your captaincy. Like, I wouldn't have given it to Bruno, just for his known petulance.
Well, the team we were comparing them to last season in terms of trajectory, not in terms of what they did last season, but in terms of what their trajectory could be with a new manager like this, was Arsenal all season. And when we're talking about leadership, I don't particularly think on paper Arsenal have, like, you don't rattle through them and say, this guy's a leader, this guy's a leader, this guy's a leader. I think Martin Ødegaard's a good attitude. I'd much rather have him as captain than Bruno. But again,
he's proving to be a very good leader, which is very unexpected.
And there's the thing. I think, look, it's difficult to say because there were a lot of years, 3 or so under Arteta, before they got good. And by the 3rd one, I was starting to question Arteta because I was thinking, is he the real deal? So I don't want to write off Ten Hag at this stage. I am concerned that they look to have made the same mistakes to start the season that they made last season. I'm also concerned that he won't be able to repeat the trick and fix it this season. When I say concerned, I just mean it from a United supporter's perspective, not from my personal perspective. But I am concerned that he can't repeat that trick. But having said that, I mean, Arteta flipped it around seemingly overnight in one summer, and Arsenal were great. But we need to start seeing. I think like under Arteta, I think we'd see under good Arteta, I should say. we'd see players like McTominay start to play like maybe he does for Scotland, or these players around the fringes, they will become more leadership, at least figures, if not captain material, but figures who lead from the front. We wouldn't see the Bruno petulance. We wouldn't see sort of these declines in players as well. Maybe that's recruitment, but again, he's somewhat to blame for recruitment as well, and vision of the club. But man, I don't know. Like, I think the question marks are there. I don't. And another thing that's good for Ten Hag, I don't know what changes if they get rid of him, and I don't know where United go from here, because we keep asking the same questions. And they could turn it around. They could finish top 5. They'll be in the Champions League next season. I guess that's a bigger picture thing that I want to touch on a bit later. But yeah, I don't know. Should we flip it to talk about other teams in the Premier League? Or do you have any more United?
Well, just really quickly on the sort of the Arsenal United comparison. 100%. I think we were going last season. We were going down that route that there would be that progression. There was a lot of similarities because United had or probably still has a lot of dead wood. Like, Phil Jones was still at the club last year. Played one game, I think, since
they started the season with Ronaldo.
Yeah, but that's different because he came back. Phil Jones was still there from Ferguson, and I think he played like 1 or 2 games since Ferguson left in totality. So that just goes to show how bad the deadwood was. So there was a lot of similarities in terms of like having to get rid of players, install your own players in the vision that you want. But like, even while we're seeing him slowly start to bring in his players, do you think Bruno is a Ten Hag type of player? Because like Arteta, actually, I reckon Arteta would have gotten rid of him pretty quickly.
Yeah, well, maybe you might be right, but he's so influential footballing wise.
Doesn't matter. Like, look at Aubameyang. Like, Arteta utilized him.
He was good for a few seasons.
Arteta had him for that half season when he came in and won the FA Cup. He had him for that. He gave him that full season where I think he only scored like 4 or 5 goals in the league after scoring like 20 and winning the Golden Boot the season before. And then I think the season where we finished 5th, that's when he got rid of him. Because like he obviously started to go downhill. Now Ten Hag's had a full season with Bruno.
It was a decent season last season, though. Yeah, that's okay. The problem. So, and given the lack of midfield depth, that's a tricky one in terms of. But I mean, in terms of what Arteta and Ten Hag have done, it's kind of similar in terms of a certain dominance, because when there's been a problem, i.e. Ronaldo last season, Ten Hag has been quick to act. So look, the whole Ten Hag player argument is the thing that trips me up with Ten Hag. I just think I want him to be, when he's been at his best, particularly at United, and I know that's a short time, but when he's been at his best is when he's been adjusting and when he's been thinking about solutions for problems. And that's why I don't fault him for what he tried against Brighton on the weekend, because he was trying to find solutions for the problems that United have. But when we talk about his style, that's the thing that trips me up. It's like, if he can't be in between it anymore, that's for sure. He's either got to be an adaptive coach or he's got to install something. If he's trying to install something, it has not been successful. What we've seen from the starts of both seasons has been abject, to say the least, if not poor. He's such a hard one to evaluate. And yeah, he gets the excuse of being at the club that's so unsettled at the moment, but he could use that to his advantage if he was, I think, a bigger personality, and he could get real control of one of the most successful clubs in European footballing history. So, I don't know. That's, for me, if I was looking at that as someone who liked to have control over what a club did, I'd be looking at that as an opportunity rather than a sort of crumbling or sinking ship. I don't know how much more we could give him that excuse. The football needs to look better. It just hasn't. Oh man, I don't know. United just haven't been good since Ferguson. When's it got to change? who the hell knows? We see these patches. But the good thing is at least 5 teams get into the Champions League for next season.
That's not a guarantee. It depends how well
So the
the
fifth
English
is
teams do.
okay.
So I think
Well,
I'm not sure what
okay,
the actual criteria needs to be. Whether like you need two English teams to get into the quarterfinals or whatever it is, but you need a certain amount of English teams to finish high enough this season to get a 5th team in.
Oh, and honestly, are we at the point? Here's my bigger picture question, and then maybe we'll circle back to the Premier League or whatever. Are we at the point where the Premier League is so damn strong that it just doesn't matter if you don't qualify for the Champions League? Is the Premier League like... is the Premier League just the competition now? I think is it the best competition in European football?
Is it the Super League?
Is it the Super League? Is it just... Because no clubs outside the Premier League, barring... you could say Bayern and PSG kept spending this summer, but no one in Italy was able to spend money. No one in
Spain. Well, Real Madrid spent like over 100 and something million.
They did on Bellingham,
but they brought in like a couple of like youngsters and that.
Yeah, apart from Bellingham, I don't think they made any. They brought in Hossel as well. Barcelona, obviously, we know that they could bring in. Atletico are operating like an Italian club. They can't spend money anymore. So, and the Premier League's the only place where you can really spend money. And I think if you look at ratio, in terms of teams who, we won't say can win the Premier League because Man City are that good. But in terms of teams who can have a who could accomplish something this season near the top of the table. I think you could put that list at 8 or 9 at the moment. And if you compare that to the ratio of teams who can have a successful Champions League run, that you could probably put that number at around 10. So when you think that the Premier League has less teams in it, so the ratio of that might be stronger than the Champions League in terms of that. So I don't know. What I've really noticed in the first... And admittedly, it's only half a round of fixtures in the Champions League. But I was not as enthralled by the Champions League football as probably the Premier League this season. And honestly, I've not been as enthralled by what goes on around Europe as what's been going on in the Premier League. So for me, this is the first season where it feels like... I know the chasm's been there financially for years, but this is the first season where it feels like, whoa... Like, the Premier League's just so much more competitive than anywhere else in Europe. And even if you get the level of competition somewhere else in Europe, the level of quality isn't as good as the Premier League. So, I don't want to go on English football is the best football and no other football matters on you, but it's starting to feel that way.
Well, how do you... Let me just see if I can look up, like, how much... each EPL team get, because the TV rights are actually distributed evenly as opposed to like, I'm not sure how it's done in Italy, but I know in Spain like Real Madrid and Barcelona get like the majority of the TV rights. So obviously there's not a even distribution, which means that all the teams in the middle of the table and the bottom, they just suck and they're never going to get better. But I'm pretty sure that if you participate in the Premier League, you get more than what you do for participating in the Champions League. Because I think
I think it also depends on how deep you go with the Champions League.
Yeah, but I think even for winning the Champions League, I think you get like 80 mil or something like that. And I think like for being in the Premier League, you get over 100. I know that.
That sounds about right, to be fair. And I guess that Champions League money we could say that it matters to Premier League clubs because that's what enables them to have the extra money to spend. So fair enough, but honestly, Chelsea aren't in any European competition and they're still managing to spend whatever the hell they want. So there's always ways around this. Villa are buying 50 million players.
Okay, so there's something here. How much money do you get for getting into the Premier League? If they go up to the Premier League, this would be Championship teams. That is going to go about 130 to 140 million pounds. And that is the worst case scenario. So there is actually like a slight like pyramid on like how you finish in the Premier League.
Yeah. Of course you get winning money.
For every additional place you finish higher, there is an extra £3 million.
Yeah, the football manager days taught me that. So, but yeah, I think the example of it is Nottingham Forest last season. We saw Fulham years ago being able to go up from the Championship and spend heaps of money. And I mean, Forest just bought Ibrahim Sangare, who I think is actually a good player. But he's playing at Nottingham Forest, and he's not playing at, I don't know, maybe Inter Milan could have used a different profile of midfielder. I don't know. These huge clubs around Europe just unable to compete with Nottingham Forest for players. I mean, what the hell is going on? It's madness. I think your whole cheeky question about is it the Super League? Well, if money talks, it is the Super League, and if quality also talks, look, I don't want to write off the Champions League just yet, but man, I feel like that gap. I feel like Premier League, a big Premier League game. Maybe it's just because of the lack of novelty, is still just behind a Champions League game. But in terms of quality, I don't think it's behind it, because I think the best clubs in Europe are nah, they're not English, but all the other ones, they've all like, you look at Germany, you look at France. There's not even competition there anymore. There's got to be no. Although, hey, I shouldn't say that right now, because PSG are not in the top 3 in Liga, so
Yeah.
that's crazy after their loss on the weekend. But you expect them to win the league. I mean, even Italy, you might have something competitive, you might not. The way Inter look really damn good to start the season, but yeah, I don't know. Like, when you think that a team like Brighton, you could be excited to watch them. And I guess you have the potential for different clubs, and all the managerial talent is in the Premier League as well. So not all of it, but the great chunk of it. I don't know. I'm off on a tangent, but I think I'm disappointed by it. I'm disappointed to be feeling this way, to be quite honest.
Do you think that it can change though? Because, for instance, in the late 80s, early 90s to mid 90s, I guess, it was the Italian league that was actually dominating. Like, all of the best players, all the best managers were over there. And then, obviously, at the beginning of the 90s, the Premier League was created. There was a whole revamp. But it only really took until, would you say, mid 2000s for it to really start to, like, the snowball to start to actually take effect. When
Mourinho came, when Wenger started becoming successful,
when Abramovich came
Abramovich and all of. But even then, it still wasn't the best league in Europe, because it might look, actually, to be fair, it might have been the best league in Europe from 05 to maybe 09-10. But then Spain took over again, and all the best players wanted to play at Real Madrid and Barcelona. And then, so the Premier League's the Premier League being the best league is only really a recent thing. The only difference I can see
since Klopp and Pep came in,
and we've talked through, but the big difference I can see now compared to then is, and we've talked about it, how serious everything is now. And the fact that everything's so serious, the fact that it looks like the finances are on steroids, and the fact that the Premier League is the place with all these steroids to enhance their finances, just means, I think, when you have resources like that behind you, whereas compared to the 80s and 90s, maybe it was more on prestige that the players were going to Italy, lifestyle as well. But now that every Premier League club has that kind of resource behind them, and Nottingham Forest can be out here spending like big clubs over Europe, when you have that behind you, I don't think you're going to have safety nets, and you're going to be thinking about it seriously enough to not relinquish that now and to stay as the best league in the world.
Yeah, but the thing is, to finish my question though, is this just a cyclical thing? Like, what happens when Klopp and Pep leave? And also, what happens when these leagues around Europe actually make the bigger decision of saying, we need to look at what the Premier League's doing in terms of TV rights and restructuring the league and whatnot?
It's too far gone.
You reckon it's too far gone?
It's too far gone for...
Well, hasn't Italy sort of done something in terms of that, or no? Because
I think Italy's been competitive somewhat because it's regressed, not because it's gotten better. I think the problem with Italy is Yeah, it's a better league for entertainment than Germany or France or maybe even Spain in some years. But the teams at the top, they're not as good as the teams like Bayern Munich, PSG, Real Madrid, Barcelona. Inter and Milan and Juve in recent years just haven't been as good as those teams. Now, Juve had, and let's not forget, Juve had the run of 10 or 9 in a row in the 2010s. And that at that point they were Italy's representative to be the super club in Europe. Now Italy don't really have a representative. I know Inter made the final of the Champions League last season,
But they're not a super club.
the draw, yeah, the draw had a lot to do with that, and you just have to look at the players they lost in the summer and couldn't replace with bigger names. So yeah, I think that's the problem. That's what I say when I say it's too far gone, because Germany, France, Spain, they're not going to want to diminish their super clubs who represent them on the European level just so that they can make a more competitive product at home. And I don't think Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern Munich, and PSG are going to allow that to happen because they have so much sway on what could happen in the future. Maybe the Super League thing kicks up again. Whatever it is, they're not going to, like, they have the leagues under their thumb. They have the advantages of all these resources. It's like, so you're going to, and they'll turn around and say, you want to diminish us and make us look worse in Europe just so that we can have a more competitive league? Like, that's silly.
But will they?
I don't think they're going to.
But will they really make them worse in Europe? Because hasn't what the Premier League created? They have more teams, more super clubs now that can compete in Europe, and that can realistically win the Champions League. Because
But they have.
because like from Spain, you've only had, I know Atletico Madrid made the final twice, but like you've only had two winners, Barcelona and Real Madrid. Bayern's been the only winner from Germany. PSG hasn't even won it yet from France. Whereas like at least there's been a greater pool. So you've had United that's won it over the last, like, let's say 15 years. You had United that's won it, you had Liverpool that's won it, you had Chelsea that's won it, and you've had Man City that's won it. And realistically, Arsenal, for instance, could have won it in 2006. So that could have been. I'm not saying that from an Arsenal perspective, but it's the same thing. Like Atletico could have won it, or Dortmund could have won it, to add another name to those ones. But like, look at that. Like, I just named four winners from the Premier League, whereas all the other leagues, it's either one or two from Spain or none. Like Italy,
Yeah,
I think it's only been Inter Milan from Italy, hasn't it? As well.
What in since the turn of the century? Well, AC won it early, so
The last 15 years. AC won it in 2007.
Yeah.
All right, like, okay, yeah, since I referenced Arsenal, okay, AC and Inter, but like,
and Juve could have won it in that time. They were a very good team.
yeah,
as well,
but then they're in the same category as Dortmund and Atletico. But realistically, it's only been 2, 1 or none from those leagues, whereas like the Premier League has 4.
But they're all at those other European clubs, sort of super teams. Atletico, well, they never broke through a 1-1, but here's why I say it's too far gone, because now the Premier League has the first mover advantages. They've already moved into that. They've already built up all this wealth and this reputation and everything behind it. Now, if other leagues try and copy that model, they're behind the Premier League, and the Premier League's just got to keep growing. And the fact that the Premier League can keep growing while these other leagues are starting again, I think puts them in big jeopardy. Now, it could work in the long run, but there's got to be some pains if they try and change that model in the short term, where players are just got to say, look, my choice is between Bayern Munich, who now have less resources to lure me in, or I could just go to the Premier League, where every club in the Premier League nearly has as much resources as they have. So, yeah, I don't think I don't think these other leagues are going to cut off a limb to sort of save the body at the moment. And who knows if it saves the body? Maybe in the long run, the Premier League just is like this giant star that is just eating everything up, and its gravity is just too much, and that's that. If the other leagues try and do that, not only will they not have a strong club, but the league will just be nothing. So,
the other factor is Pep and Klopp. Do you think that maybe once they move on from the Premier League, like let's say more so Pep, because Spain's dominance came from when Pep was there. There wasn't necessarily a dominance when he was at Bayern, but there was one when he was at Barca. But do you think that when those two managers move on, let's say they both go to Italy, do you think that then, depending on how long they're in Italy for and whether the clubs that they're at start to compete really strongly in the Champions League, like making the semis, making the final, winning it, do you think that, and if they're there for like, let's say 5 to 6 to 7 years, like they have been in the Premier League, do you think that then you see this sort of uplifting of standards of the entire league? Because the domination really of the Premier League has come over the last 7 or 8 years.
It's a tricky one. I think we're confused. We're not reconciling our definitions of domination. I think your definition of domination, and rightly so, is on the pitch, and I usually focus on that.
I understand that there's a domination in terms of finances, and there's
I think that's what I'm talking about more.
I know, but like, if these two managers go, they're going to attract more players. The other teams then around will probably want to come to Italy. The other teams then will want to try and spend more to attract players to come to Italy, and maybe other players will then want to. If you start attracting the best coaches, you then start to attract the best players, and then like more players will then want to play in, for instance, Italy. Like if Klopp goes to Napoli and Pep goes to like Juve or AC, like those.
For me, they don't have the resources behind them. I know what you're saying, and yes, maybe one of those teams, particularly if Guardiola went to Italy, I think his team will be fine. They'll be challenging for the Champions League each season. I honestly don't think Italian football is in a place, any of those clubs is in a place to go and get a Pep Guardiola, because they know not only will he cost us a lot, but also the talent that he'll want to attract will cost us a lot. We just don't have that money. We can't go with a vision of Pep Guardiola right now. And to a lesser, maybe not to a lesser extent, but Juve tried it, and that's what's broken them actually, because they went with the Cristiano Ronaldo model, and they were just like, we need someone to take us over the hump and get us to Champions League glory, and we're going to change our whole plan from what Juve did in the early 2010s, which was get very smart free transfers, very smart sort of. Paul Pogba came over, I think Pirlo came over on a free. I think they were getting players either like who were approaching 30, they were paying much less for these players and molding a very good team to change to the Ronaldo, and it broke them. And I think that's a cautionary tale for all other Italian clubs. So at the moment, I think the resources is such a big thing to why they can't do this, why they can't even contemplate going out and getting a Pep Guardiola. Even though every club in Europe wants a Pep Guardiola, we can't afford that. We can't afford that strategy right now. So I get what you're saying, and I agree. On the pitch, if Pep Guardiola went to Italy, they would at least have one, and hopefully maybe a rival, doing well in Europe. But even when he was in Spain, it wasn't league-wide, the transformation that Pep was able to have. It was just Barca and Real. And it was mainly then because Real got Jose Mourinho, who still had extremely high stock at the time. So that's the problem there. The Premier League is able, if Pep Guardiola's in your league, he can have influence on the whole league, because those clubs all have the resources to, hey, let's go out and have a vision where we get, even Everton years ago, they got Carlo Ancelotti. You're like, what the fuck's going on? Why is Carlo Ancelotti at Everton? What the hell is this? But, I mean, the amount of managerial talent that you get in the Premier League is unbelievable compared to pretty much anywhere else. Italy's the only place that somewhat rivaled it in recent years. But you can't judge them on the same scale, because the Italian clubs just have nothing compared to the English clubs. So Yeah, man. I think I don't like to focus on the off the pitch stuff. Usually, I'm much more of an on the pitch guy. But I think this is the first season where it's pretty justified to be not the first season, but to be a Premier League snob. I'm not going to be like. There's a lot of there's a lot of other quality on the same quality football in Europe. I just don't think there is. I've got to be honest.
Yeah, and but you know how we also spoke about, you know how obviously since Todd Bowley, for instance, has come in and spent, has he spent like 800 million since he's come in? I think it's
Yeah, it might
something
have even
around.
been a billion.
I think it's something around 800 million. I also saw the highest spending managers since they've started their careers. I think Pep's number one. He's spent over $1 billion on transfers. And I think there was, I think there's, I think Mourinho's second under him. He's also cracked that billion mark. But anyway, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, I did mention like a while ago, like depending on where these clubs, where these Premier League clubs are buying these players from, if they're sending, well, Newcastle, they sent I think 70 million to AC. So they've strengthened AC in a sort of way. So depending on whether they're buying from outside of England, they're strengthening these clubs to become competitive. However, Chelsea, they spent what they bought Caicedo from Brighton, so the money stayed in England. They bought
Their strength.
they bought Enzo
Yeah.
from Benfica, so they strengthened Portugal in a way.
Well,
So,
I want to.
but then it
I
also
want to
becomes hang on. But then it also comes down to how well these clubs are actually going to manage this money,
Exactly.
because
They're strengthening them if they buy great players with that money. But
but
there's look if
but not every club
if,
is being
if
run like Brighton. That's the problem.
yeah, can you exactly and that might have resources to do with it as well that they can strategize like that because they have that Premier League money. But also, if at the start of the season you said, who do you want in that AC Milan midfield more? Do you want Sandro Tonali or do you want Ruben Loftus-Cheek? I think it's a pretty easy decision. I know they got 70 million, but they didn't
Ruben.
replace Yeah, they didn't replace Sandro. And admittedly, Ruben Loftus-Cheek
He
has looked
started
okay.
well. He started well.
To start at AC, but yeah, man, it's so strengthening is maybe a loose term in terms of they're giving them a lot of money,
In a
but
way,
they are weakening them on the football pitch.
yeah. It's more of a it depends on how well they're going to invest that money. Like you can give someone, like for instance, you can give a poor person $100 million. Like a lot of lottery winners, like they win like 50 million, 100 million, but then they become broke after a couple of years because they've never seen that amount of money and they don't know how to manage it. So if you don't know how to manage the money, like you can give all these clubs around Italy, Spain, and whatnot, you can give them all the money they want, but if they can't manage it properly, they're doomed to fail. And Juve, look at Juve, like they were such a well-run club, and then all of a sudden they changed their policy and whatnot, and now they're struggling they're struggling on the football pitch, and they're struggling to like get into the Champions League.
Yeah, I'm gonna sign off from this topic with somewhat echoing what you just said in terms of. I think all you need to know is that the 7 times champions of Europe, AC Milan, felt like they had to send or to sell a 3 or 4-year-old Italian,
So. Yeah.
not quite prodigy, but very promising young Italian player who wanted to stay at the club and was destined probably to be their captain very shortly. They felt like they had to sell him to Newcastle United. Not the Newcastle United, and I love Newcastle and what they're doing at the moment, but they're not 7 times champions of Europe. So I think that says it all. AC Milan felt like they had to sell this guy to Newcastle, and I think that just tells you the might of the Premier League. And if we're not there already, we're very close to yes, the Premier League is the new Super League anyway. So, how important is Champions League going to be next season with the new 40, I think, 8 team structure?
Yeah,
Is
something
that
like that.
dilution gonna not kill it, but start to kill it? It's a tough one. It's a tricky one, but we'll see. Maybe it'll be for the betterment
Have you
of.
let's go into that, and then we'll go into the Champions League, and then if you want, we can sort of wrap up any games around Europe that interest you. I know there was
Yeah,
a massive scoreline in a Milan derby, but I guess it's a good way to go into the Champions League. I think the way that the format is going to be run, like I'm not sure. Let's say it's 48 teams. I heard that apparently it's going to be one league system. So it's going to be one complete league. Everyone's in the same league, but they play 8 games, and then like the top 8 qualify automatically for the round of 16, and then the next 8 play or the next 12 or whatever the numbers are, like they play like a playoff game amongst each other to then fill in the spots for the round of 16. How do you feel about that system? Because like the thing is, like, what if I'm not sure how they're going to necessarily computate the fixtures, because what if you're, for instance,
it'll be like a pool system, like they do with the groups at the moment. I imagine you wouldn't play all the teams from the top pool.
yeah, like
You'd have to
imagine your Dinamo Zagreb, who didn't qualify this year, but like imagine you're them, and then you're playing like Man City, Real Madrid, like all your 8 games against like the first or second place teams in like the old top leagues. Like, well, you're fucked. Like, you're gonna finish last no matter what. So I don't know. Do you play like? I imagine that the one way that they do is like you play like I guess how you said, like there's a pooling system, so you have like one game against pool 1, one game against pool 2, pool 3. So you have like, if there's 8 pools, you have one game against each of those pools. I assume.
Yeah, I think that's how they'll do it.
Like, what do you think about that system? Do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? Do you like it? It's heading towards that Super League system, sort of.
I would somewhat prefer a Super League because then you get a league. But I've already shared my opinions on that on the pod. But I would need to see this. I would need to see it practically, because right now I can't quite comprehend it. I think as long as they've made those safeguards against what you said in terms of playing too many top teams or whatever it may be, I don't know. That's not necessarily a bad thing for me, because I don't want to see more teams in the Champions League. In fact, I want to see less teams in the Champions League. So, and yeah, I need to see it in practicality. I need to see. I wouldn't think that the Champions League will lose its luster because of any changes, but also who knows, because it does seem like it might be diluted somewhat. I don't. Like, you could contrast this to the World Cup and the changes that they're going to make for that, which again I'm not 100% down with,
I'm
and I
not a
need to
fan of
see it in
that.
practicality. Well, I must say, I think in the World Cup example, I think it might be okay, because I think there was at least a few nations from the last World Cup where you're thinking, damn, I wish Italy were in the World Cup. I mean, why the hell aren't Italy? I wish this team or that team. I mean, Egypt could have been in the World Cup. That would have been a good addition. So I think there's enough international teams with enough interest. I won't say they're good teams, but they at least have interesting, maybe a superstar on their team or a star. They have a few good players. There's enough of that to make it somewhat interesting. But for the reasons we were talking about in terms of, I don't know if it translates the same to international football in terms of the resource levels as it does to club football. Do I want to see more teams from Bulgaria in the Champions League? It's fair that they should be there, but at the same time, for my viewing pleasure, I don't. I would probably rather all those places go to more Premier League teams. And, like, honestly, I think Brighton could be as good an addition as anyone in Europe to the Champions League next season. So, yeah, I need to see it in practicality. I need to see all the teams who are getting in. how many more spots each league are getting. I can't formulate strong opinions about the format just yet. I think for me, it's a wait and see sort of thing. But I think one thing is starting to feel real for me in terms of what we're talking about there and in the Champions League. It's football's not at a crisis or a tipping point, but it's at a point where it's gotta take a path. I almost feel, because we had the Super League fiasco a couple of years ago. I think this is all still snowballing from that. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much longer this model is gonna persevere. Big call. I know it's a big call, and maybe it's a bit too much to think about right now. But yeah, is football going to change forever very soon? It kind of feels that way for me.
Since you mentioned the Super League, like a question has sort of come into my mind. Like, would a Super League actually help these? And this sort of ties into what we were just talking about. Would a Super League help make the Italian, Spanish, German leagues more competitive with the Premier League? Because if you take out the top 4 or 5 teams from the Premier League, does that actually help? But you're also taking out the 4 or 5 top teams from all those other leagues. So you're taking out AC, you're taking Juve out, you're taking Inter, Napoli, I suppose, since they're sort of cemented their spot as a top 4 team in Italy. But you're taking those teams out of Italy. So as you're weakening the Premier League, are you also then weakening or strengthening the other leagues if you take out Real Madrid and Barca?
Yeah, I think you'll take the most teams out of the Premier League because they'll be Super League ready. Whereas,
but how much money does Barca and Real bring into Spain? Like that would be, and then you bring Atletico into that as well. Like that's massive in terms of TV revenue.
Yeah. But then I think to your point, it makes all those leagues, the quality isn't as good because you've taken out the top teams, obviously. But they're all on similar standing and they're all similarly competitive, I think. I think once you take those super teams out of all the leagues, then all the other leagues, I would suggest that Italy might be the strongest league after you take the super teams, because I don't think Lazio would quite qualify for a super team, but they are still a team with a history and a very good team at the moment. I don't think Roma would classify, but they could stay in the Italian league. Then you've got those two maybe battling it out for a league title, and they're brand enemies, obviously. There's intrigue there.
But the thing is, who's going to be paying, let's say, $1 billion or €1 billion in TV rights money for a league without Barca and Real?
It's all for the Super League.
So then don't these leagues then get less revenue?
Yeah, for sure.
So then it'll kill the leagues, wouldn't it? In one way,
kill them, but in one way, but in the competitive way, it wouldn't kill them, and
it could. They wouldn't have the money to attract the best players anymore.
Well, the thing is,
even the mediocre players.
The thing that I've always said, there has to be an avenue for you to get into the Super League from your national league. So it's now a qualifying league, pretty much.
Yeah.
And it's not the Super League. It doesn't have the super teams in it. But it's got that level of intrigue because you want to get out of it and you want to get into the Super League or Super League 2 or whatever, however they configure it. So yeah, I don't know. For the intrigue level, for all of that, maybe it's a league I wouldn't watch because I only watch elite football anyway, so maybe I'd only watch the Super League, but I don't know.
So we would
That's
lose,
up to you. That's up to your preference.
We would lose Caleb's European corner.
No, my European corner would just be the Super League corner. I'd just be talking about Bayern Munich playing against Real Madrid again for the third time this season.
Wouldn't that just be the football experience then?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it would make my job so much easier.
Yeah. But let's go into the Champions League. We've had one round of fixtures.
One half of a round.
One half of a round. What have you made so far of the fixtures from yesterday, and then we can touch on what we expect from the fixtures for tonight. That's going to happen.
They were fucking dire. Oh man, I watched 3.
Which ones did you watch?
I watched Newcastle Milan. Awful game.
You know
really
what?
bad game.
You know what it felt like that with watching Newcastle? It felt like there was like Eddie Howe put the handbrake on them. He threw too much caution
Fair
to the
enough.
wind.
It's a good result.
I
A point
know,
at the San Siro.
but
It's not too bad.
I know, but if the way that you saw, the way that we watched Newcastle play last year and I guess this year as well, because they have sort of continued, the results haven't come yet. But it just felt like he threw too much caution to the wind.
Well, as in, he just used too much caution. He
Yeah.
didn't throw any to the wind. He's just like, I'm keeping all this caution.
Well, the saying is
yeah.
throwing caution to the wind. But yeah, like it just felt like it was a little bit overboard the way, because it didn't look or feel the way that that we're used to Newcastle playing.
Well, let me flip it and say why I have no real problems with that tactic. Do you think Newcastle should be favourites at home against Milan in the reverse fixture?
Yeah.
I think they just about are as well. Although, no, I think they just about are, because if Milan want to repeat the Newcastle trick and do that at St James's, I don't trust their defensive unit as much as Newcastle. So I think they're more equipped to do that. And also, I'll ask, do you think they'll be favourites at home against Dortmund? I think there's no doubt they'll be favourites at home against Dortmund. Newcastle will. So the point at the San Siro is actually a great result, because now it's just like, all right, we got a home game where PSG, I think they'll be out. They are the favourites for this group. And they obviously that's the other game I watched, the Dortmund PSG. Again, a pretty dire match.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say as well, I thought Newcastle's problem maybe wasn't so much tactically. I think Eddie Howe said, if we can't win this game, we're not going to lose it. We definitely do not want to lose this game.
They did deserve to lose, though. I felt they did. Yeah.
Yeah, just about. Milan created that flurry in the first half. Did they do that much in the second half? Not really. Rafael Leao had a fairly poor game, and if he doesn't have a great game, Milan, or maybe a little blunt, because Tio's great, but he has to do it from left back. You're asking a lot if he's going to be the decisive factor. But I thought Newcastle's problem in this game, as it has been for a lot of this season, is the lack of creativity in the team. It's a highly industrial, highly functional team, and it's highly athletic. But if you're asking him to unlock defenses, they just can't do it. And Bruno Guimaraes is either being doubled up and being really focused upon by oppositions, or he's just not playing well this season. That's probably a little bit of both. And yeah, that's why Newcastle, they can look good to a point, like they did in this game. They looked all right in the first 5 minutes because they were able to press. But once the press goes, what's Newcastle's plan B? They just don't really have it. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't know if they should necessarily be as a great team that can break you down at this point. But I will say I thought it should have been somewhat an emphasis in the summer to get a player more in that profile who can give you some creativity, particularly midfield, to unlock defenses. So I think Newcastle will struggle that at least till January. But a point at the San Siro is a great result for them, because I think it now probably for me puts them in the box seat to qualify out of this group. But there's still a long way to go. It's too easy to say that at the moment. But yeah, I think there's that. I don't know if you have any more views on that game.
Not necessarily. Like I can.
Did you watch the other? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, like I can understand that. Yeah, I agree with you that for Newcastle, getting a point at the San Siro it is a good result. But yeah, I just feel like had they have approached it the way that, like in the style and manner that they approach most Premier League games, I felt like they could have gotten a result. I'm not sure if, like, I think Joe Ellington was injured. Adding him to the team, I'm not sure how much of a difference it would have made. It does add an extra pair of legs in that sort of midfield, and like an extra more brute force and more running, more energy. But yeah, like I just feel like it was too. I'm sticking by that point. I feel like it was too cautious by Eddie Howe, and I feel like they could have gotten a win if they approached it like a Premier League game.
Yeah, fair enough, but they also could have lost if they. For me, the big decision that shows that is the example of what you were saying was Jacob Murphy playing on the right, and that for me was clearly because they were a bit worried about Theo Hernandez going the other way. So yeah, maybe you could meet fire with fire in that matchup, but honestly, I don't fancy your chances if you're putting Almiron in there for Jacob Murphy and you want to. And Almiron gets through his defensive work, but if you want to go a bit more. Hey, cheat a little bit and go the other way and let's try and hurt him. Yeah, sure, that might work, but I think Theo's got to hurt you more than you can hurt him. So, yeah, all in all, thought it was an all right tactic. I think they'll be battling it out for second. I would say second, but PSG only beat Dortmund at home, so I don't know how consequential that result is.
What do you make of the penalty, like, before you go into the game?
That was fucking terrible. It wasn't a penalty. What the hell are we doing?
Why don't apparently, like, they use Hawkeye technology? Hawkeye obviously tracks the movement of the ball in tennis and in cricket. Why don't they track the movement of the ball in football to see
to say that it's going nowhere near the goal?
That shot looked, at least from the angles they showed here, it looked like it wasn't going on target whatsoever, and I think the Dortmund player was slightly falling as well, so he was using using his arm was going to be used to brace himself for his fall. So
that was a terrible decision. I can't believe it stood. It was horrible. It was horrible.
Yeah,
and that breaks open the game. Hakimi adds a lovely second goal, but PSG are pretty uninspiring this season. I get what Enrique's trying to do. He plays a no rotation system. Basically, maybe he's giving Hakimi a bit more license to rotate now, which is good because when he's on form, he's one of the best attacking sort of fullbacks in the world. But for long periods of a game, PSG can look pretty poor and pretty sort of maybe not poor because they're kind of in control of the game, but more so just uninspiring. They're not creating much. They're not moving the opposition around that much. The opposition seem to be pretty comfortable. At least they're somewhat defensively solid, but honestly, they're playing against Dortmund, who I just don't think are a very good team. They sort of went into their shell. They were largely cautious as well, thinking that a point would be a great result. They went to that 5-3-2, whatever. Those players, they're not that good. To be quite honest, I think PSG just all across the board are a better team than Dortmund. I expect Dortmund to finish fourth in this group, but we'll see because I think the home factor, the fact that they play at that crazy place, might give them a chance in those home games against Milan and Newcastle, maybe even PSG, which they might have to beat in the home fixture. But yeah, it was a pretty uninspiring game, to be quite honest. So I think I fell asleep during this one. No, I fell asleep during the Milan-Newcastle game, to be fair. So this one, I think I managed to stay awake for.
Well, it's interesting that you almost fell asleep, considering you're watching it I guess you watched it like in the morning as well.
I put it on in the afternoon today, so it was an afternoon nap. Was there any other games that sort of caught your eye? I think there was some pretty interesting news from Lazio, wasn't there? Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That was the game itself did not catch my eye in any way, shape, or form. It might have been the worst of the three that I watched. But I was interested to see how Atletico would get on after getting shellacked by Valencia on the weekend. 3-0 and see if they could respond. But man, the only thing that we need to talk about from this game, Ivan Provedel, 95th minute, just ghosting into the box, little glancing header to equalise. It was the only moment of note in the game. I honestly, I don't think he's been top Ivan Provedel for a while, but it was nice to see a goalkeeper goal, like a nice goalkeeper goal as well. Like it looked like he was just meant to be there the whole time. The way he timed his run, and then just when he got there, he didn't panic, just flicked it into the back of the net. It was lovely to see. But if Atletico held on and won that game, that would have been a big result for them in that group. So
was Atletico away? I can't remember now.
Yeah, it was at the Olympico. So they were all the away team. But I think both those teams should be fine. I can't remember who they have in their group else. Well, I don't know if I can say Lazio. Even know if I can say Atletico should be fine because they, like I said, got shellacked by Valencia on the weekend, and Lazio got beaten by Juve away. So they were big games, but I haven't been inspired by anything this season yet, man. That's why I know I said I didn't have much to say. We're an hour 24 in, but we haven't really been talking about football. And yeah, I don't know how much there is to talk about football so far this season. I don't know if you feel differently, but I just haven't been loving this season so far.
It feels like it's been a slow start. Like the teams that we're expecting to play. So I know that, like, for instance, United in a bad way has surprised us. Your team, Liverpool, like they're picking up points, but like I'm watching. I've tuned into some of their games, and like compared to last season, they're playing better. But like I still feel that they're vulnerable. So like there's still issues that need to be fixed there. But at least they're winning games now. But all in all, like the season has sort of started the way that I expected it to start, except for Chelsea as well. Like they're completely. They're probably in more of a mess than what United is in. But I feel like, I know we're off topic because these two teams aren't in, or United is in the Champions League, but Chelsea isn't, Liverpool isn't. But like Chelsea, I feel like I have more confidence in getting out of this rut than United.
Yeah, maybe just it's close between those two because
I think it's because the team is just so young and has like this raw sort of potential that like if Poch can figure it all out and
I thought you were going to say Potter for a minute there because that's what we were saying all last season.
But yeah, if he can sort of get them to gel, get them to mold, then I feel like they can be a really good team to watch and whatnot. But anyway, let's get back to the Champions League.
Yeah, well, this is the problem, and this is why I say I haven't been inspired. It feels like this is just a continuation of last season, and like I get that, but I don't know if I've ever felt like this going into a new season. That like everything, it's like we never had a break. We're back, and every team is pretty much playing exactly the same way. There wasn't really a huge amount of upheaval over the summer. I mean, what did Man City do? Not much. They got Guardiola in. They got Doku in, who was excellent on the weekend, we must say, against West Ham. But they're playing exactly the same way. Arsenal tried to tweak it, but for the most part, they're going back to playing the same way that they were playing last season.
Arsenal do look more solid, though, and like they have a little bit more control than what they had last year. So they look slightly different.
Slightly, maybe. I'm not going to co-sign that they look more solid just yet because they looked really solid at the start of last season as well, but more exciting.
Yeah, the thing is, like, it was...
But Declan Rice is a good addition in there.
There's this sort of... I can feel this sort of slight air of, I guess, maturity about the team and a bit more patience. I don't think last year's team... Even with Declan Rice, if Declan Rice played last year, I don't think they win the game against Everton. I think there's more patience now.
Perhaps. And I'll definitely give Arteta credit for his evolution in recent seasons as well in terms of his demeanour, because I think that if you want to see more patience, I think he's the one who's demonstrating more patience overall as well. I think each season, since he's made it probably a point for himself, he's been a little bit less animated each season.
He's less
I think he's continuing that. Yeah, I think he's continuing that because he used to be a nightmare.
Mm.
He still can be a nightmare at times, but he's nowhere near as consistently bad. So yeah, I think that's a fair thing to say. But yeah, for the most part, I don't think they're changed. I don't know. We'll have to see more. We're only 5 games in. Yeah. It's hard to say. Yeah, go on.
Well, speaking of Arsenal, like this is the Champions League segment, and we're sort of like going all over the place. Like, but speaking of them, they're back in the Champions League.
I'm just trying to say, like no one's like changed that much.
Yeah,
you know.
I know. Like Brighton are still playing the same way that they played last season, as well.
At least that's really good.
The only teams that have sort of changed is United for the worse,
Liverpool,
Tottenham for the better. Liverpool still,
Tottenham.
like I said, Liverpool still seem like they're.
But the personnel is so different. In
yeah,
that
like Liverpool
so
are better, but they're still unpredictable. They're still unpredictable.
Yeah.
On both ends of the pitch.
Yeah.
But yeah, like back to the Champions League. I did see a headline that regarding the Bayern versus United game. It was Bayern dealt a huge injury blow. Harry Maguire out injured.
They don't need it. They don't even. I don't think they need the help. Although, yeah, Bayern they aren't. I don't know. Bayern drew 2-2 against Leverkusen on Friday night. Both things can be true. I think they probably created enough chances to win, and they could have won because they got two pretty horrendous decisions, I thought, given against them that led to a really nice free kick goal by Grimaldo, and then a penalty in the last minutes from Palacios for Leverkusen to get them a point. But at the same time, I think Leverkusen deserved a point. I thought they were good in the press. I thought if Florian Wirtz maybe had a better game, they maybe could have won it. But they were good enough to get a point. But at the same time, Bayern will feel hard done by because the refereeing decisions that led to both their goals were, for me, egregious. I don't think there should have been a penalty. I don't think it should have been a free kick. So, but Bayern, uninspiring again. Very little rotations, much like PSG. Tuchel's chosen to play that way. I think the main example of that is Alphonso Davies pretty much being an out-and-out left-back and not really overlapping, not really getting forward unless it's exactly the right time for him to do that, which fascinates me when you start Conrad Laimer as the right back. For me, it means it should mean that you can have more control in the midfield and Alphonso Davies could get further forward, but maybe Tuchel wants that defensive solidity, which they're not quite getting for whatever reason. Probably goalkeeper is a big deal. Kim Min-jae has been good since he's got there, back? But he's in the stands. He's back in the stands, but he's starting the goals. So yeah, the problem is for United that they're Manchester United at the moment, and Bayern on paper are just a way better team. But Bayern are a way better team than 95% of teams in Europe, 99% of teams in Europe on paper. And Tuchel just hasn't got it clicking yet. So I expect them to win at home against United, but I can't say it with chest because, yeah, Bayern haven't shown me enough so far this season to suggest that they are an all-conquering force. And that's what they were last season. On the theme, we're back, but towards the end of last season, this is exactly who they were, and they continue to be exactly who they were, even though they added Kim Min-jae to their ranks and Harry Kane. So yeah, am I excited for this game? Probably not, but I am always interested to see what happens to Manchester United in this moment.
I sort of have like a question regarding Nagelsmann, because obviously we don't agree with the sacking of Nagelsmann from last season. But do you think if Nagelsmann was there, do you think Bayern would have got Kim Min-jae and Harry Kane? Because Harry Kane seems like a Tuchel signing.
Yeah, I don't know how much influence Tuchel has on the signings. Maybe he has a fair bit. I don't know. I don't
think Kane would have gone to Bayern if Nagelsmann was there.
That's an interesting one. I don't know what would have happened with that one. I think the Kim Min-jae one still probably
that one probably happens.
I think if anyone from recruitment came up to Nagelsmann and said, "Do you want Kim Min-jae?" I think he'd say, "Yes, please go out and get me that guy." But the Harry Kane one, obviously, because he has maybe a bit more agency in the matter and choosing where he could have gone, whereas Kim and Jay was they could pay the release fee and then they could negotiate him. Yeah, maybe that's a bit different with Nagelsmann, but at the same time, it's still Bayern Munich, and it would have meant almost guaranteed silverware, which was the only reason that Harry Kane really should be leaving Tottenham, I believe. It was for silverware, and that's why he's gone to Bayern. So, yeah, it might not have been different, and maybe Bayern would be playing better football than what they're playing at the moment. I'm surprised that it's taken this long for Tuchel to find something that works. But on the bright side, Upamecano continues to not make too many oopsies. So at least there's that for Bayern. Having said that, watch him make some egregious error against Man United tomorrow morning.
Harnesses his inner Harry Maguire.
Yeah.
I'm just having a look at the other games. Like there's not really any others that there's none that scream out. Like Real Madrid Union Berlin should be interesting just because it's Union's first time in the Champions League. For me personally, Arsenal PSV will be interesting, but that's sort of it. Like there's not really any exciting games that scream out like "watch me," you know.
Yeah, this is the problem. This is what the theme of the pod has been, but this is the problem right now. Whereas most weekends, if you go into the Premier League fixtures, we just had a weekend where I guess Brighton against Man United is screaming "watch me." I thought West Ham against City because West Ham were in a good moment as well, was screaming "watch me." Even Liverpool going to Wolves after the international break in an early fixture, that's like, oh, there's intrigue here. Like, what's going to happen? So, yeah, whereas the Champions League, yeah, I don't know. They're not screaming "watch me."
Like we're going to have to wait for the round of 16 to get those games. Is there anything else you want to touch on, or are we going to sort of wrap things up? Do you want to touch on the Milan derby or any other games Europe that occurred?
Well, the games around Europe. Well,
just
we
quickly,
actually had some.
And then we'll wrap
I'm not going to go too in depth. I would say from the Milan derby, Inter. We should really do a power ranking eventually. I haven't seen every team, which is annoying. I haven't seen Leipzig yet this season, who have started really well. But we should eventually do a power ranking of the best teams in Europe because Inter might be number one at the moment. They have started the season unbelievably well. They do have AC Milan's number in recent years. They always seem to get the better of them. But this game was something super convincing. They killed them and they didn't even need Lautaro to score. But if you want to watch any goal, out of all the goals, you've got to watch the Marcus Thuram second goal. Maybe the best goalkeeper in the world couldn't get anywhere near this strike. It was right in the pigeonhole and it was smashed. So that was a beautiful goal. That was a beautiful result for Inter, who look very strong at the moment. I think the other game to probably touch on would have been Real against Real Sociedad at the Bernabeu. I think Real are another team who would be high on those power rankings. They're at least somewhat interesting to watch with the new look Real, even though they don't have Vinny at the moment, but Jude Bellingham continues to impress, obviously.
Is Ancelotti bringing back the diamond midfield? With remember he had Kaka at AC?
Yeah.
So Bellingham's
he's doing it with Bellingham.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just doesn't have a striker. He had a few striking options at AC. He usually favoured two strikers, in fact.
Yeah,
rather
Crespo
than
and Shevchenko. And then he had
Crespo and Shevchenko or Inzaghi.
Well.
Yeah.
I think there was one other striker as well.
He had Gilardino for a bit, I think, as well.
And then he had Pato as well towards the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very young Pato.
Yeah, Real looked okay. I mean, Sociedad are a really good side. I must say they're very well organised, have good players, good technicians.
I think they're playing against Inter tonight.
Yeah, so that's a game that I think I'm more interested in that than
it's not
probably
screaming.
United.
It's not screaming "watch me," but it's It's like whispering, "Watch me."
Yeah, fair enough. Although Inter are a very good watch at the moment, so that actually should be the most intriguing game out of that tomorrow morning's, even though Man United are playing Bayern. But yeah, Real did enough in that game. They were 1-0 down early. Yeah, I don't know how much more there is to talk about from Europe. I think the two standout games. And the spanner that Valencia threw in the works by smashing Atletico Madrid is that I guess there's a bit of intrigue from that as to will Atletico bounce back and prove that they are one of the top 3 teams in Spain, or is that the result that starts to show us they're not on the level of Barcelona and Real Madrid, and it will very much just be a 2-horse race this season because Barcelona were super convincing in their home win against Betis, and I'm a little bit worried that João Felix might actually start doing quite well for Barcelona because his first 2 games, he scored another 2 this morning. He scored 1 against Betis as well in that game, and he's linking up quite nicely with Lewandowski. His little dummy assist, I don't think he'll get the assist, but the dummy for Lewandowski to score in that game against Betis was quite nice. So, yeah, Barcelona are adding different strings to their bow. They also got João Cancelo. He started for the first time against Betis. He also scored. So, yeah, they've got a little bit of a different look, a little bit more offensive and a little bit more link up and help for Lewandowski with João Felix. So maybe Barca are one to watch in terms of how they're evolving with those 2 players in the lineup. But yeah, apart from that, I'm interested to see how Atletico go in the league in the next couple of fixtures. I think that's about it. Apart from obviously, I didn't get to watch it, but PSG lost 3-2 to Nice on the Friday night, and they are not in the top 3 in France. But I expect that to change. But yeah, it's been, like I said, an uninspiring start from them so far this season.
Yeah, well, it's only, I guess, around the leagues. It's only the first 4 or 5 games. I think there'll be more to tell.
We don't know anything yet.
Yeah. There'll be more to tell after another maybe 5 or 6 games. Like once there's 10 to 12 games played, then I guess we can start making some better conclusions. Just to wrap it, I'm not sure if I had a thought yesterday. I'm not sure if we should maybe do this as a segment when we have some free time, maybe during an international break, just something to think about. But like a alternate timeline for football. So for instance, one thing that sort of just crossed my mind randomly was Hungarian football. It's nowhere to be seen, really. Like they haven't really had any success at all. What if they won the 1954 World Cup? Because they had some great players. They were the favourites for that tournament. I think they smashed West Germany in the group stages. I think they beat them like 5-1 or something like that, or 6-1. I think I'm pretty sure it was like a very convincing scoreline. But they obviously didn't win the final. So like, you know how obviously, and then like Steaua Bucharest as well. I think they won the Champions League. I think they may have won 2 Champions League, or like they made like 2 or 3 finals. But I think they have won a Champions League. So like, this alternate timeline maybe had Netherlands have won the 1974 World Cup. Would German football be as strong as what it is right now? Had the national team not have done well when money wasn't a factor in football? So like it would be interesting to sort of explore that sort of like maybe
what
like
ifs.
An alternate, like
what if,
like a football alternate timeline, because like Hungarian football, like it was absolutely fantastic and great. It was like a domination. Like they were like considered revolutionaries in terms of formations and tactics back in the 40s and 50s, and then like now it's like after that it's
and
like
what happened?
Nowhere to be seen.
What happened? Who won that World Cup? The Germans. What happened in 1974? The Dutch. They're so innovative. They're the forefront of world football. The Germans won again.
Yeah, like Germans are there to spoil the party always. But yeah,
to be fair, that 1974 West Germany side
it was a good team.
One of the best sides of all time. So let's not discredit that team.
But so was that Netherlands 74 team as well. Like they were one of the best sides. I think, and all the maybe Brazil doesn't need a mention because Brazil's won 5 World Cups, but the 82 World Cup, that was apparently the greatest Brazil team to have never won a World Cup.
Until 22, for me. My God. They should have won it last year with that team on paper.
Yeah, but like,
man, I was saying that team could have been as good as Brazil 1958 if they went on and won it, but their attitude, man, their attitude is not.
Yeah, but then was it the was it 1950 Brazil lost to Uruguay?
Yeah, 50.
That too, like they're just this sort of alternate, but then again, like they lost those finals, but they've still won 5 World Cups, and they're still considered one of the greatest, if or the greatest footballing nation. So yeah, like it would be interesting to see if we can like maybe sort of do this timeline. I guess with, for instance, Croatia, like I know we lost to France, and we'll have to probably revisit it in 20 years' time to see where Croatia will be. But like, had Croatia beaten France, where would they be? Yeah, just maybe we'll reserve this for a segment during international break, and it'll give us some time to actually think about. Yeah.
Interesting. Footballing what ifs.
But I just think that it's probably more relevant 30, 40, 50 years ago because money wasn't an issue. It was more passion. But then like maybe it would have influenced them to the governments to like invest more money in sporting infrastructure and whatnot. But yeah. Anyway, Caleb, I think that'd be a wrap from us. We didn't touch on 2 hours. Thankfully, I'll probably cut out some segments. I think we'll do I'll cut out the Super League segment and maybe one of the other segments. But if people want to listen to the full podcast, it takes like an hour to render like a half-hour video. Like, come on, man. Like, anyway, to people that tuned in, make sure you like, subscribe, and all that stuff. And thanks for coming. And bye for now.